If you have just failed National Registry, or you're getting ready to take any one of the NREMT exams, this video is for you. My goal with this video, I want to give you a concise but comprehensive review of how my students prepare for the NREMT exam and how they pass and get results. Step 1, we call this content. So, step 1 is understanding the national core content. What this means, you hear me say it so many times, here's what I'm talking about. On the screen here, I'm going to show you. There are 5 main sections in National Registry. We get a bonus, hang with me. Now, for every one of the NREMT exams, EMR, EMT, AEMT, Paramedic, the 5 main sections are airway, respiration, ventilation, cardiology and resus, trauma, medical OBGYN and EMS operations. Now, with the advanced EMT and paramedic exams, we have a 6th section, and it's called clinical judgment. More on that later, and it has to do with a style of questioning. Now, what we mean here in step 1 of content is you need to be studying these content areas, the ones on the screen here. If we have a knowledge deficit, whether maybe we didn't do so well in class, or your class didn't prepare you up to the national standard, we have to get you up to the national standard as far as your knowledge in order to pass. And we know every classroom around the entire country is going to be different. Every instructor is different. Every student is different. So, first step, we got to study these areas, understand the key terms, understand the emergencies, the signs and symptoms, the treatments underneath these sections. That is number 1. Step 2 is what we call knowledge check questions. So knowledge check questions are just like it sounds. After you've done study sessions and you reviewed all the areas of National Registry, you feel confident that you went over the content. Great. Well, now what my students do is they review knowledge check questions to make sure they actually comprehended what we just went over. Okay, this is so important. So if we, after watching content and studying, we want to take knowledge check questions afterwards to make sure we're comprehending the material. Our goal is to get them all right. That means that we've comprehended the material, right? So this is what we do. Step number 3 in this process is taking NREMT practice test questions. So this is where we have a separation between EMR and EMT and AEMT and paramedic. So under EMR and EMT, we're going to study the 5 main sections of National Registry, and those content areas are NREMT practice questions. Now, for ALS providers, AEMT and paramedic, we're still going to study questions off the main 5 areas of content, but we're also going to study in the area of what we call clinical judgment style questions. Now, what is this? Clinical judgment style questions takes you from the pre-scene, the on-scene, and the post-scene phase, and will ask you a variety of questions just like you are on a 911 call out in the field. And that mirrors the call, and it asks you, hey, what would you do next here? Or it appears this is their medical history, and it can go off into another question about medications. It's all based on the scenario that you get. In the scenario, we have to understand a lot of things in that scenario, right? So this is why we go over stuff like understanding all of the emergencies, diseases, prescription medications, EMS meds. We got to know all this to break down the scenario and actually know what's happening. And then we got to obviously treat the patient. It's part of the call, right? So that is our practice questions. Now, whatever you are using to study for NREMT, make sure you take a final practice exam with a goal of getting at least 80%. So I tell my students, your goal is to get at least 80% on all the practice question items and on our final practice exam. All right, that's our goal. Now, if we've done all of that work, that is how my students prepare. But I want to give you a bonus and a few tips. Okay, so let's talk about the bonus now. At the end of this, I'm going to give you a 4-step process on what all my students use. But first, I'm going to give you some tips you can take into exam day. So number one, people always ask me, how long should I study for the exam? Well, it's not about how long you study for. What it's about is completing the study plan. So I have a program, it's the first link in the description, called the Video Vault. It breaks down all this. Videos, knowledge check questions, practice test questions. We have worksheets, a community group, audio files. The whole study plans are in there. So what this means, whatever you're using, make sure you complete the entire study plan. If you failed, I tell my students to go through that study plan at least 2 or 3 times. Now, some extra tips for exam day. When I look at an NREMT question, here's what I have my students do. What I would have you do is read the question over at least twice, and then review the last line of that question at least twice. Then take a look at our answers, and now we can make a decision, right? You want to look out for key terms. We also call these buzzwords in the question. Like, for example, so is someone tired, like tired respirations, sluggish respirations. That might mean it's time for oxygen, or maybe it's time for a BVM, right? Look out for some of these things, right? Look out for those signs and symptoms, right? Remembering shock is tachycardia, hypotension, low SpO2, they need oxygen, right? So look out for some of these things. And again, this goes into my final bonus point I'm going to share with you. I have a method, it's called the 1, 2, 3, 4 method. I share it with all my students, and this is how they understand all the emergency diseases, signs and symptoms, and treatments. Let's take a random disease. Let's talk about, let's say, asthma, okay? Now I'll put it here on a blackboard so we can see it. This is what my students do. You need to tell me, number one, what is asthma? Explain it to me simply. So how would I do that? Well, asthma, explained simply, it is bronchoconstriction, constriction of the lungs, of the bronchi, right? What else? We have hypersecretion of mucus. We have air trapping, right? We have wheezing. That's a sign and symptom. Coming up in a minute. But that's asthma, right? That's what it is. Now, what are the risk factors of asthma? A lot. Could be smoke in the air, right? Could be the patient is sick or ill and they have asthma. That can flare it up, right? It could be the weather, cold or hot weather that flares it up. It could be something they're allergic to, like a pollen in the air, right? That's a certain time of the year that triggers that asthma, right? So those are some of the risk factors of developing asthma. We know that there's children with asthma, and then asthma can also be in adults too. So both patient populations can have asthma. What are the signs and symptoms? Well, here's what I was talking about. Wheezing bilaterally, right? If asthma is really bad, we can even have a silent chest where both sides bilaterally, both sides of the chest, we call it a silent chest, can't hear nothing because they're so clamped down, right? So what are they going to appear as? Well, their heart rate's going to be increased, their respiratory rate is going to be increased, and their SpO2 is going to be lowered. They'll be wheezing. And again, they might have a medical history of asthma, right? So those are our signs and symptoms of asthma. What might they have in their medical history and their medications? They might have ProAir, Ventolin, albuterol inhaler, but that rescue inhaler has failed, and then they've called 911. So how do we treat it? Well, we got to give oxygen to this patient. We have to give nebulizers to this patient, right? That's more on like BLS. Right? Well, what about ALS? Well, of course, we have epinephrine IM, right? We have magnesium, right? We have anti-inflammatories like Ciamedrol, or we can use. So these are treatments of asthma. And remember, if I didn't mention it, we have a duo neb, right? Of course, some areas could be BLS, but many it would be ALS, which is going to be albuterol to do what? Albuterol is going to open up, and then ipratropium is going to dry up the secretions. See, but now I understand that asthma is about tightening and too much mucus. Now I understand why we give a dual neb to that patient. See how it all ties together? This is how I teach my students. This I can teach you. And that breaks down our 1, 2, 3, 4 method of what it is, risk factors, signs, symptoms, and how do we treat it. If you want to learn more about this method, if you want to pass NREMT, whether you're getting ready or you failed an attempt, I'm here to help you. First link in the description, I'll give you a lifetime access to the Video Vault training. Hop in it. We'll break everything down, your videos, your knowledge checks, your practice questions, your worksheets, your community group. I'll see you there. By clicking in the first link in the description, you get lifetime access to my Video Vault program. The Video Vault includes over 480 videos of content and now holds over 2,000 national registry practice test questions. Also includes some really awesome bonuses like worksheets, drug cards that are pre-filled out all for you, community group access to ask me questions, and audio files when you are on the go. The Video Vault will find you no matter where you're at, whether you're an EMR, EMT, advanced EMT, or paramedic student, and my students use this whether you are getting ready for school, in school right now, or getting ready to go past your national registry exams. So click the first link in the description right now and get yourself lifetime access to the Video Vault today. I'll see you there.